I'm on a mission to make a super easy reversible Christmas tree skirt. The goal is that it will look complicated but be very simple to put together. I'll also be cutting some corners and removing some of the elements that I feel are unnecessary for a Christmas tree skirt. So stick around and let's see if I can make this happen. Sometimes friends and family members will very politely request that I make something for them, and mostly I say no, politely of course. But if the one making the request is a fellow crafter, the answer is much more likely to be a yes. So for this project, a very dear family member has requested I make a tree skirt, and she's provided me with these fabrics that she specifically chose for herself. So nice range of greens and reds. So other than the color palette here, I have been given free rein to design and make this tree skirt however I want. I have full creative freedom here. So this should be fun. Before I pick a pattern or start designing one of my own, there are a few things that I know that I definitely want to avoid. So first things first, a lot of the tree skirt patterns I've seen are assembled in wedges, and I won't be doing that. Wedges are not on my Christmas 2025 bingo card. Next up, most tree skirts seem to be round, and I can see why. It makes sense. But personally, I think I want to piece together a square quilt and then maybe just round off the corners a little. And lastly, most tree skirts have that slit down one side, and then you have to make an attached ribbon or fabric cords or whatever, I don't know. I think this step is entirely unnecessary because this quilt will be used with a fake tree. So there will still be a circle in the middle, but as long as you remember to put the tree skirt down before you start assembling the tree, I see no reason for that extra work and that slit. Okay, I've got all of that negativity out of the way. So now I just need to track down a quilt block or a pattern that looks deceptively difficult. Okay, that took a lot longer than I was expecting. I thought that I was going to find a pattern online that I could buy and then just make little tweaks to customize it to what I wanted, but I ended up having to do a deep dive through all of my old magazines, some of my books, and then finally when I got to this book, I started getting an idea of what I was looking for. So in the section of my book, Triangles and Diamonds, I saw this quilt. All it is half square triangles, just a bunch of them in different sizes, and there's just a ton of them. And you know what? I realized a lot of something, no matter how simple it is, can look difficult. So I was like, okay, half square triangles, simple, look difficult. I did a little more flipping and I found this one, and it's the same thing. It's just a ton of half square triangles and it looks really difficult. So this is sort of where my head was at, but I didn't know what scale or how I was going to use them really. And then I reached this quilt and I was like, okay, it's definitely the half square triangles going at an angle that really was speaking to me. And then I remembered this book. And this cover quilt is exactly what I want. And it already looks a little bit Christmassy to me. You can see that it finishes at 26.5 by 26.5, and that is way too small. So I'm going to take it to EQ8. I'm going to upsize the blocks, remove the borders, and I'll see what I get. Okay, so this is what I came up with in EQ8, and I had to change just a few little things. So first of all, I omitted the corners. So instead of rounding them, I'm just going to completely have blunt corners so that I have sort of a mimicking of a round quilt without having to do any rounding. The next thing I changed was the size of each block. So in the original one, I think it was 5 inches, and these blocks are all going to finish at 12 inches, making this a 48 by 48 inch square-ish, minus the corners. And finally, the last thing that changed was the amount of half square triangles in the block. I wanted easy measurements. I didn't want a bunch of 8s and whatnots that I would have to cut. So I changed it to 4 squares here instead of 5, which maybe will make it look not quite as complicated as if I had a little bit extra going on, but who knows. Speaking of 8th measurements, I hate 8th measurements. I want to stick with quarters. So for these blocks, instead of 3 7/8 inches, I'm just going to bump it up to 4 inches. So I'll be doing 4-inch squares, and then down here, instead of doing 9 7/8 inches, I'm going to bump it to 10 inches. I'll just have to scavenge some fabric from my scrap bin so I can make a quick little sample to make sure that all of my measurements work out correctly. Okay, I think that turned out pretty good. It was fast, it was easy to put together, but there was one flaw that only the pickiest of quilt plates will pick up on, and that is the gaps right here. So technically, if this was perfectly pieced and everything, the points of these squares would be right against this outer fabric here. If you're wondering why it turned out that way, it's because, remember, I bumped up the measurement of my squares from 3 7/8 to 4 inches. And that wasn't a huge deal because I could square up my half square triangles, but I forgot about trimming these. And you know what, honestly, if I had thought about it, I still wouldn't have done it because it seems like such a little thing. So it came out neat and tidy. I'm just gonna go with it. I'm gonna use the same measurements, and all of them will have just these like slight little gaps. But you know what? You're not going to be able to see them when this is on the ground and there's presents piled on top. So I can officially move on to the next step of this project. For the front of this quilt, or the top of the tree skirt, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to use these red fabrics and maybe a neutral from my stash. And I really wish I had more of this. That would be so good for the neutral. But I'm going to use these reds. And for the backing, I'm going to piece together a grid of 4.5-inch squares out of these greens. And maybe these white and reds, not this one. So both sides are going to have their own unique vibe. Got the red, we've got the green, and maybe a little red, I don't know. So next up, I'm going to put on some Christmas music and I'm going to prep and cut my fabric. Look at this green polka dot I found in my stash. I like it. I think it might work. It's a little cheeky, a little different, and it could be really fun. Okay, that took forever. I am such a slow cutter, but I'm finally done cutting everything for the front and the back. So I've ended up with 6 10-inch squares in my background, 64 4-inch squares, and then for the red, I have 8 10-inch squares and 64 4-inch squares. And for the back, I have a bunch of 4-inch green squares, and I can't remember how many there are. I had it written down somewhere, now I can't find that paper. But I finally get to start, actually, oh no, I just realized I also have to subcut these into half square triangles. Everything here needs to be subcut into half square triangles. So I'm going to do a little bit more cutting. I can't believe I forgot that. I decided to do 1 at a time half square triangles for this because I just think that the 2 at a time half squares, they just don't save any time, at least when I'm doing them. They don't save any time. And I also prefer to use my seam guide when possible because I get a better result most of the time. So now I have 64 total half square triangles, and they've all been trimmed down to 3.5-inch squares. They're looking nice and neat. Next up, I need to start working on this stripe that goes through the middle. So for the stripe, I need 3 different units. I'm going to have one that looks like this. One unit looks like this. And the third unit looks like this. So in total, for these 2 smaller units, I only need 16 of each. 16 of this, 16 of this, and 32 of this full unit. And when I'm matching these up, I'm making sure to match from the corner of my half square triangles and not from the point. And because I didn't trim those triangles, I'm going to have an extra big dog ear here. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to support this channel, check out my merch shop and buy me a coffee page. Okay, let's get back to the video. Each of the half square triangle strips needs one of the partial red units, 2 full units right here, and one of the partial white ones, like so. And before I sew these all together, I am going to cut off the giant dog ears. And you could eyeball it, but I'm going to use a ruler just so I'm extra careful. So I can go ahead and use that straight edge to make sure I don't cut off anything extra or I cut anything at an angle. So I'll just go through and do those real quick. When I pressed these units, I pressed towards the half square triangle so that when I piece them, I can nest these seams nice and neat. So these seams right here, fold it over, and I'm going to nest them, just like that. Okay, just one more pressing tip. For this seam here, I'm actually spinning it so that it lays nice and flat and doesn't get too bulky, and it's working out very nicely. So, okay, that is 1 down and 15 more to go. And I'm going to chain piece these so they go a lot faster. And then once all of those are done, all 16, I'll take some time to cut off these dog ears so I have some nice clean sides to work with. Okay, here we are. 16 finished half square triangle strips, and they weren't the most fun to do, but you know what? They worked up quickly enough, simply enough, and now I'm ready to move on to the next part. So the white one is going to go along the side with all the red triangles, and the red one will go along the side of all the white triangles. Now you may notice that these triangles are a little big, and that is because I increased the size when I cut them out. So it was 9 7/8, and I bumped it up to 10 inches. And so there's a little bit of a difference, and that is perfectly fine with me because I can just trim it off when I square up the block. But in order to get this centered, I'm going to fold my triangles in half, match up those points, and give a little squeeze in the middle so I can get a nice crease line. I don't think you can see it on camera, but there's a crease there. And then when I fold this in half to get the halfway point, I'm going to fold it the opposite way. So I folded this one right sides together, and I'm going to fold this wrong sides together and make my little crease. And then I can just flip that over, match the creases, and sew along that seam. So I'll see you in a little bit after I get both sides put together on all my strips. Okay, I've got 4 corner units. They don't have the white part. And then I have 12 full units. So now it's time to put it all together. And I could do this row by row, but I'm going to do it corner by corner and then put the corners together. So I'm going to make quadrants. So that means each quadrant will look just like this. Okay, almost done. I have quilted everything. I've added the binding, and now the last thing I need to do is cut the hole in the center. So I made this 6-inch circle. I have the lines here that will help me orient it along these seams so I can get it as centered as possible, as easily as possible. Just like that. And then I'll take a friction pin and I will trace all around that. I'm going to cut out that circle, and then I'm going to add bias binding to finish off those raw edges. So almost done. This is the very last step, and then I can show you what it looks like. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss upcoming videos. And I'll see you again real soon. Bye!